Good morning, welcome to Full Scottish. We've been out for a while, but we're back now with an hour-long programme of Scottish news and culture every Sunday at midday. I guess one of the biggest challenges the SNP faced in recent weeks, months, has been the Scottish budget, which is now going to its final vote after a deal between the SNP and the Green Party. James, again, is this a good deal? A good budget?
Yes, a very good budget. I mean, and when you consider the financial circumstances, Derek Mackay deserves incredible amount of praise for the job he's done. You know, you would never have thought that with our financial deal that we could have come out with such a fair budget, such a financially stable budget as what Derek produced. I think it was quite an incredible feat. And fair dues to the Greens come in, at least they took part, right? You know, they played like adults. They came with a proposal. They talked to Derek, and they got a lot of what they were after in the budget. But all of that stuff that they got is stuff that we're all very comfortable with. None of the things that Derek and Patrick or whoever it was that was dealing for the Greens came to decision on was anything that would make members of our party uncomfortable. It was all, we have to try and find the money from somewhere else to do that for the Greens, but it's something that we're quite comfortable being able to do. So it was a good deal all round. Labour have now looked like what they are, a complete and utter shambles. They don't have any leadership, they don't have any vision, they're only there to say that we're bad. And the Tories are, well, kids might watch this programme, but the Tories are leave a lot to be desired in the Parliament. They are only there as a negative force, they are not there as a positive force at all.
I mean, I think one of the key things is, you know, big things that needed to be faced was trying to develop a progressive tax structure, and I think Derek has done an amazing job with 70% of people paying less than they paid before, and 55% of people paying less than they would pay if they were living somewhere else. So doing that and yet raising more money is amazing. Lifting the pay cap on public sector workers, and therefore anyone less than 36,500 will get a 3% pay rise. And also extra funding into the NHS. And the fact that those three big planks of the budget, Labour voted against, I'm sorry, they just don't have a leg to stand on.
And what are you going to sing for us just now?
Well, I think I'm going to sing a song that I've actually never performed live before.
It's risky.
Yeah, I wrote this song for my release of my debut album, which was launched at Celtic Connections last week at the concert hall, which was really exciting. But the album is called Away From My Window, and it kind of pays respect to Stanley Robertson, who was a traveller from Aberdeen. His family was like instrumental in, you know, having ballads and keeping the ballads going. And this is a song that I wrote simply to add a song that I wrote to the album, because a lot of them are traditional, and the strike between writing and being a traditional singer is very slim. There's a thin line. So it's called The Banks of the Tigris, and I literally don't write much, but I read an article, and I felt pretty profoundly shocked at it, and just kind of wrote a little bit. So hopefully I can remember it. It's bad when you can't remember your own
we'll keep our
songs.
fingers crossed, and perhaps after you have performed it, you can join us for a discussion about Celtic Connections, and then we'll get back into Brexit, because the two things are not unrelated.
Yeah. By the river the children are playing, the sun and its heat growing strong, but around them the bullets are reaching, and we don't speak of who they come from. On the banks of the Tigris, we don't speak of who they come from. In the West Bank town of Ciara, its river it now runs with red. Our enemy lines always changing, and we only believe what is read. On the banks of the Tigris, we only believe what is read. Mosul, she now lies in ruins. Our people have all gone and fled. Oh, our headlines are written with anger, and we judge only what we have read on the banks of the Tigris. We only judge what we have read. The survivors, they still have their tongues tied, and they won't talk of what they have seen. Oh, our enemy line's always changing, and we don't know of whose hands are clean. On the banks of the Tigris, we don't know of whose hands are clean. By the river the children are playing. The war silently flows by their eyes. The young men are fighting their battles, and we don't know of what we have seen. On the banks of the Tigris, we don't know of what we have seen. On the banks of the Tigris, we don't know of whose hands are clean.
Another story that's just developing just now, just before we came on air, is the information that Carles Puigdemont has been arrested in, I would believe, Germany. No more details are available right now, but we will try and bring you up to speed with that as the programme continues. I mean, Lynn, what do you think about this?
Well, when you came in and told us that, my heart just sank to my feet, because I think this ongoing story about politicians democratically elected being, jailed without even trial, I just find horrific and very scary.
Keith, hard to, again, imagine anything of this nature happening here, or is it?
Well, there's a story actually emerged, it's not the same context, but a story emerged over the last few days of the first ever black officer in the UK who played for Rangers and for Tottenham Hotspur. And just looking at that story, in 1917 it was impermissible in the UK Armed Forces to have somebody as an officer who was not of pure European descent. I'm not saying that's what's happening.
How long ago was that?
1917. So, that was written into the regulations. And it's a campaign now to see that a medal is awarded in that particular case. Now, so we have done some things in this country which we're not very proud of, is the point I was going to make. But in relation to this, as Lynn says, being imprisoned, but they're being imprisoned for what? For expressing a view and standing an election and winning an election. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to imprison people for that, where does it end? So I think it's extremely troubling, not just Carles Puigdemont, but the others, of course, who've been imprisoned, and even people in Scotland subject to judicial proceedings as well, which is extremely worrying.
Yeah. I went in, being a good Scottish mum, I went in to get some carrots to make some soup, and it was that moment, that revelation where I looked, and the carrots, they're Angus carrots, and they're grown literally from the fields around where I live, and suddenly they were being called British carrots, and they had a Union flag over them. Now,
in October was round about the first time you noticed that happening?
I'd noticed it before that. I'd noticed it with the fruit, strawberries from Kincardineshire being called British strawberries. I'd noticed it through the summer. It was growing.
But was that your tipping point, really?
That was the point where I sort of picked these carrots up, and I looked, and suddenly I realised I was surrounded by more bunting than a Jubilee celebration. and I thought, what is this? What's going on? And then I realised that more and more conversations I was having with it was, have you seen the flags and that? And talking to farmers, because I live in a farming community, and the farmers going, these are our carrots. What? The farmers don't like it. So I went on social media, and I did a bit of tippy tapping and they took a photograph and posted about these carrots. Now I've got a tiny wee Facebook page, a really insignificant little Facebook page. I got 30,000 responses to that posting. So that was when I thought,
clearly
okay,
people feeling the same.
People feel the same. So let's test it out. And I spoke to a few people, and I spoke to a few farmers, and I spoke to a few industry leaders, because I'm the kind of person that phones up people and talks to them. And I knew about the Scotland the Brand campaign, which had been so successful, was the precursor to Scotland Food and Drink. So back in the 1990s through the early 2000s, and that's why I called it Keep Scotland the Brand.
The National picked up that campaign, and one of the criticisms that's levelled at the campaign, as it appears in the National anyway, from readers, or rather, let's just say not readers, but people who see it and say, isn't that a parochial attitude? Because, you know, why are you obsessing about flags? Why are you obsessing about those issues when really it's about whether or not farmers make a living?
So, to be honest, I'd be delighted if there were no flags on anything. I just want clear provenance. The National Farmers Union of Scotland, you read their literature, farmers want clear provenance. I've spoken to farmers whose personal politics will never align with mine, and they're telling me they have walked out of supermarkets in disgust when they see the packaging, because they want people to know where their food comes from, because clear provenance is good for business. Local provenance is good for global sales. Scotland's place in the market, in the domestic market and the global market, is important upon our brand identity. Our brand is Scotland. And if you were to try saying to a major burger chain, your brand's brilliant, it's working really good, let's just stick a crown on those two arches and see how you get on, they wouldn't go for it, because brand identity matters. And this isn't my campaign. I gave it a focal point. I gave it a voice. But it's Scotland's campaign. If people across Scotland weren't supporting this, if people weren't backing it, if industry leaders weren't backing it, I would just be a lone person raving in my kitchen about carrots. But this campaign has a movement, because people who work in the industry know that we are facing a potential crisis. We are facing the potential loss of hill farms across Scotland. I had an arable farmer, a farming representative, who said to me that he knows from conversations he has had in Whitehall is prepared to let arable farming go because it is cheaper to import rather than support. Now, if you're talking about the primary function of any government being national security, you want to talk about national security. We had a few flakes of snow, and suddenly our supermarkets look like something out The Walking Dead. And you're trying to tell me that it's okay to have a nation which doesn't grow its own food to import from the Ukraine. You don't need to have nuclear weapons sitting up the Clyde. You just need a few people with clipboards stopping the food coming in, and suddenly we have a food emergency.
Well, I was very pleased earlier this week when the Speaker of the House of Commons granted my urgent question, calling the English Attorney General to the Chamber of the House of Commons to explain why the UK Tory government is taking the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament to court, questioning the legality of the act that has been passed by a cross-party majority in the Scottish Parliament to try and protect devolved law from the consequences of Brexit. I think it's really outrageous that the Tories, having lost the vote in the Scottish Parliament, are now using the courts to try and overrule this act. I think what this legal challenge to the Scottish Parliament's democratically passed bill shows us is the limits of devolution. When you've got a devolved parliament, it seems that it can always be overruled and overridden by the UK Parliament. And to my mind, it shows that what Scotland needs to protect its position, both in Europe and also to protect us from this ghastly Tory legislation like the rape clause, is a truly independent parliament like other nations in Europe enjoy.
We're going to move on now to kind of more general opposition arguments towards the Growth Commission. There was, of course, Richard Leonard came out and said that there'll be 10 years of austerity from what the Commission proposes. He made the argument that the Scottish Government will be paying £5 billion of annual payments to London for the sake of having a good deal, whereas actually that could maybe go towards those who are most in need. How would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, he's economically illiterate.
That's pretty blunt.
Well, yeah, say it as it is. I mean, I would say the first thing is I don't recognise that at all. It suggests to me that he's not read what is in the Growth Commission, how the arguments are presented. Let's just take one of the silly things that he said. If you look at the Growth Commission, it's talking about we need to grow faster We need to invest more, right? And we will invest more. And it will take us 10 years to grow and reach the targets we want to reach, right? That is about growth. The Growth Commission talks about growth, not about austerity, not about cuts. And so he completely, perhaps deliberately, misses the point there. Indeed, what I would say to him is the Labour Party's attitude, not least to Brexit, they are the ones that are condemning the Scottish people to an unlimited period of low growth and austerity. And they have no credible economic analysis at all to present about how to improve matters in Scotland. So it's a bit rich for him to complain about a report he's obviously not read, or if he has read it, hasn't understood it.
I heard the story and I thought it was fake news at first. I thought, surely that can't be true. I mean, are they so out of touch that they think that's a good idea? Because it's a bit, I mean, what it says is, number one, they don't understand Scotland at all. It displays a level of arrogance, I think, that, well, do you know what, we're propping up the UK government, we're getting our way, we've got £1 billion, what is it next? No, you're not touching our laws. If we want to discriminate and force women in Northern Ireland to go overseas or now south of the border to get an abortion, that's our right to do so. Guess what? It's like, well, I'm the King of Scotland, I'm Queen of Scotland, I'm going to go across, I'm going to front up a march. Imagine Nicola Sturgeon went to Northern Ireland and fronted up a march in terms of republicanism or anything, right? Anything. I mean, imagine she went about in the front of a march about the NHS, anything. People would go loopy. The papers would have a field day, and yet here we have Arlene Foster, who's supposed to be a party leader, right, of a certain stature, coming across and fronting up a march for an organisation that I personally share the sentiments that have been made, but wouldn't want to give them publicity. In all honesty, I think their intolerance is best left behind. But what this does is it certainly pushes them to the fore. And actually, maybe this helps us. Maybe this reinforces and reminds people what we're up against. We get worried. I get worried because I don't like people at our marches chanting about the Tories, because it should be about, it doesn't matter who you vote for, it's where do you want your decision made. I get worried about that. But crikey, look at what the other side have got, right? And you don't need to look much forward than this march. So bring it on, bring your pals if that's really what you want to do.
So are you saying there's maybe a double standard with the media then, but the idea that they're kind of...
forbid, a media double standard. I mean, double standard doesn't even do it justice, does it? I mean, we all know, everybody knows. The other side know too, it's just they enjoy it because it serves their purpose. There is a massive double standard.
I was so proud to work as a journalist with the BBC. And when I lived and worked around the world, the BBC's name carried great weight. And it wasn't until I came back 3 years ago that I started putting the qualification beside it. And people used to say, oh, what did you do? I'm a housewife now. I'm an angry housewife from Kirriemuir now. But people used to say, well, what did you do? And I said, oh, I used to work for the BBC. And now I say, I used to work for the BBC in the days when it was good. Because the thing which breaks my heart about the institution that we're standing in front of today is that it really used to stand for quality journalism and impartiality and balance. But the thing is that for many of the folk working inside the specific key today, they still believe in those things. They still want to do a good job, but the problem is that they know that their bosses aren't looking for that. In the good old days, back in the 1980s and 90s, I used to work with two guys who were very close relatives of the then Minister for Culture, a Tory minister. And to this day, 20, 30 years later, I still could not tell you what their personal political viewpoints were when they were carrying out interviews or making programmes or making editorial decisions, because they truly believed that impartiality and ethics and fair standards of journalism mattered to everybody across the board, because you can't have democracy, you cannot have a healthy functioning democracy unless you have equal access to the truth and to facts, so that the population can make their mind up. They can make their mind up about the little things, and they can make their mind up about the big things. Now, many years ago, I used to be a wee peace camper. I didn't go to university. I went to Greenham Common and to Faz Lane, and I lived in the mud outside the gates for a while. And that was where I became interested in journalism. That was where I became convinced that having access to the facts, to the truth, was important. Because I could see, I'd be doing a demonstration, or I'd be talking to soldiers or squaddies, and I knew what the truth was. I knew what was before me, and I could see the way in which it was being reported, and I could see the way that some papers reported it differed from the way that others did, and that got me really interested. And I got interested in propaganda and what propagandist tools are, because I was interested in the USSR, and I was interested in repression and repressive regimes and how they function. And what alarms me now is to see that we are seeing some of those traits which repressive regimes use in controlling the media slipping in to be normalised in what we see today. So, for example, the other day the BBC had a headline saying protesters storm bookshop. But the story was you had a load of right-wing thugs going into a left-wing bookshop that was selling copies of George Orwell's 1984 and attacking staff and disrupting, trying to destroy the books. Now, history has seen that before. That's not a protest. That's far-right thugs trying to stop freedom of speech. And I believe it happened several decades ago in Germany, and it didn't end well.
Davidson argued that if you do go for Sterlingisation, you'd have another country controlling your interest rates and also a country controlling your money supply. But just from what you've said there, just to kind of maybe round up, you feel more ambitious that an independent Scotland could actually go for a new currency much faster than suggested by the Commission report.
What I would say is, there's a very good piece in today's National by Alex Salmond on currency. Indeed, I think there's a little YouTube video out where he talks about it as well. And so I am absolutely as one in Alex's view in this. If you look at countries, I think the example he used of Hong Kong in one of his pieces, where over the course of 70 or whatever years, it had innumerable different currency choices it made for itself to suit its own circumstances. And the same is true of many countries. What we need to have is the flexibility and the confidence in a Scottish government that when the time is right, it will make the right choices about currency options. Right? To be honest, you've quoted Ruth Davidson, you've quoted Richard Leonard and all the rest of it. I would say this, it's the SNP that's produced the most substantial economic analysis about the future of Scotland ever produced. Right. They lead parties that have produced precisely nothing. Ruth Davidson's Tory party, more than 2 years after the referendum on exiting the European Union, have still not produced one side of an A4 of robust economic analysis of where the UK economy is headed. It ill behoves them to criticise people that are willing to put in the work to address the interests of Scotland, to address the interests of our economic future, when all they do is ignore and snipe from the sidelines.
We're starting a 500-mile walk today, over the next 3 weeks, from Portree or Skye, through 70 different towns and villages, meeting up with 106 different yes groups, and we're going to arrive on the All Under One Banner Edinburgh March on the 6th of October.
People's Doorstep referendum. Be the change.
You've been reported in the press this week regarding the timing for the Scottish Government to make decisions on our own referendum. I think maybe you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I've been in the SNP ever since a teenager, and the reason I joined the SNP, I guess, like every other member, is because I want to see Scottish independence, and I want Scottish independence to happen as quickly as possible. But you look at everything which goes on at Westminster, the democratic deficit, the fact that the poor are punished by austerity, everything which has gone on about the denying of the rights to women of a certain age, their pension rights, and so far and so on. I mean, there are so many things that would make us angry as to how we're governed in Scotland today, and I know that if we have independence, that we will have a fairer, we'll have a more prosperous Scotland, and I want that to happen as soon as is practically possible. What I would simply say is that what the First Minister has put across is we need to know what the destination of Brexit is going to be. We have a mandate from the people of Scotland through the elections to the Scottish Parliament in 2016, and once we know the outcome of Brexit, we can sit down and we look at what should be the constitutional opportunities for the people of Scotland. I think what we should be doing today, what we are doing, the First Minister said in her conference speech to the SNP way back in June, that we should be discussing the why of independence. And I'm delighted that here in Skye today we've seen off a group of walkers that are going on a 500-mile walk through Scotland, arriving in Edinburgh on the 6th of October. As much as anything else, that's about that opportunity to engage with people whilst they're on that journey, on Scotland's journey towards independence. I know that we will have that opportunity to vote on Scotland's future at some point. I look forward to that happening, and I look forward to Scotland becoming an independent nation. I know it will.
Sort of banning these groups, it could play into that narrative that they've been using very, very effectively. Do you think there's a risk there of, I suppose, giving that sort of fuel to that fire?
Well, I think we need to take seriously this, and I think there's some, we have to apply zero tolerance in this kind of organizations. There's a limit in freedom of speech. You cannot use your freedom of speech to promote aggression, to promote violence. And they use the democratic platforms to do so. And it's very, very complicated to explain people that that's not good, that's not okay, that's wrong to promote that kind of speeches. Mm-hmm. But I think every one of us should take our time and read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If you read that, you can understand basically your rights and also your responsibilities. Because freedom of speech is not about liberty, it's about liberty and responsibility. And every one of us, individuals and groups, have to be aware of that. Mm-hmm. So I think zero tolerance with fascism, zero tolerance with neo-Nazis, zero tolerance with the far right, because enough is enough. I think it's time.
Mm-hmm. So there has been demands that member states and national sports federations, in particular football clubs, counteract the scourge of racism, fascism and xenophobia in sports culture, where a lot of this can kind of cluster. How effective do you think that will be in helping sort of tone things down a little?
We only need to go back to the apartheid regime to see how important sports can be in getting a message about, because I think that it was really when sports organisations were banned from going to South Africa, and when a lot of them made their own choice not to go, that the public started to realise just what it was that the people in South Africa were facing. So sport has got a crucial role. I mean, obviously we have our own issues in Scotland with the issues around about football at times, and I think if football clubs and sporting clubs can get behind the message that fascism is completely unacceptable, be part of the movement to erase it from popular culture, which has become part of popular culture. It's quite amazing over the last 10, 15 years that we've seen politics moving so far to the right. We've got a national broadcaster that, as Pilar talked about earlier on, that invites Steve Bannon onto the programme. We've got Aaron Banks on BBC this morning, who's being investigated by the police, and he's on to defend his case before it goes to court. I mean, there seems to have been this subtle, quiet move to the right amongst institutions, including sports institutions, but obviously, in many ways, more importantly, broadcasters, that is very, very concerning indeed, and there has to be something done about it.
I thought, to lighten the mood, we'd look at a lovely Gaelic song from Eriskay, and it's probably one of the most well-known Gaelic songs, called the Eriskay Love Lilt. So this can soothe your soul. I should have a wee think of the next bit. Faith me of who, faith me of who ye, faith me of who.
veronachste mir. Shimmeche ich luch suar, gaf mi kurz mi laum hin, gesandranik mich an Tatsch, van rokerach gjalt mochdi. Feed me of who, feed me of who, feed me of who, smi favrons du gami. Naum die kromme gewische glaun, an ik snai meer mokri, von nach du god the love, dulken fakig du me. Feed me oh feed me oh ye, feed me oh smi habronachste mi. Get nach ele shinja hast post, am in doch as gumbi, at sevates mogagorn, chavil bon orni. Feed me oh, feed me oh, feed me oh, smi favrons du gami.
I think the extension of Article 50, if that happens, just means we're going to get more and more of disinvestment and job losses and the undermining of the economy. And the other thing that's worth bearing in mind is 2021, if Brexit was to happen, and we didn't go relatively soon, then the idea that Brexit might become normalised is quite a worry. People get used to it and that's the new normal. So that, I think, I know is also in Nicola's mind. One of the things that's very important is what happens on a Section 30 order. So now, I have said, and I think Julian may have been able to agree with me when I've said it, I don't think that certainly the SNP and I don't think the Yes Movement should be willing to anticipate a refusal of a Section 30 order as a reason not to call a referendum. If we want to have a referendum, then we decide we're going to have a referendum.